So welcome everyone to the fifth session in the Teacher, Technician and Advisor workshop series. I'll be handing over very shortly to Laura, who will be leading this Fashion Forms workshop for you. Firstly, for those of you who are attending for the very first time, my name is Liv and I work in the recruitment and outreach team at NUA. We're really sorry not to be able to welcome you on campus, but hopefully this whole series of online workshops will be really helpful for you. We're very aware that during this uncertain time, some of your students will be feeling particularly anxious about their futures and what COVID-19 means for them. And for that reason, we'll be linking you in the chat to our most recent FAQs about how the NUA community is dealing with the situation. Some housekeeping bits before we get going. We'll be keeping your audio and video off for the first part of Laura's presentation. So if you have got your video on, if you could just switch that off now, that would be really helpful. It just means that everyone watching can see Laura's presentation really clearly, and hopefully it will keep the majority of the session running quite smoothly. Once Laura does finish her presentation element, we're very happy if you do want to turn on your video so that we can see you kind of making and creating, and then there will also be specific points where we'll want to catch up with you individually and see how you're getting on with your fashion forms. So with that, if you just let us know in the chat at those moments, we'll facilitate you kind of turning on your video and having a chat with us as well. We are also recording this session, so if your connection drops out, if we have any technical problems, please don't worry. We will be circulating this to everybody who signed up, so you won't miss anything at all and you'll have access to it afterwards. Also, if you do have any questions for us throughout the session, as I said, put those in the chat and I'll be on hand to answer those, and we can also put any of your questions to Laura at the end of this session. So I think that's everything from me. So I'll hand over to Laura now to get going with the workshop.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Liv, for your introduction and the housekeeping for today. So hello and welcome to everybody that's joining me today for the online Teacher, Technician and Advisor workshop. As Liv mentioned, my name is Laura Spinola and I'm a lecturer on the fashion course here at Norwich University of the Arts. My experience in the industry includes being a designer and owner of a bespoke label, a merchandiser for a niche as well as a mass market brand, and academics. So today's session focuses on fashion forms and the relationship between 2D and 3D. So before we begin, let's consider the context. So what is fashion exactly? A question which I would say is often asked and to which there are many answers. I've put a few thoughts together on the next few slides that I'll share with you in a moment. But what I want to just mention is that the answer to this question is by no means limited to these thoughts, but it is a starting point. So firstly, fashion is freedom of expression and individuality. So what that means is, from the designer's perspective, it may be the freedom to express your own creativity or a personal design aesthetic. And from the wearer's perspective, it's an opportunity to visually express your personality through the clothes that you wear. Fashion is evolution of design and technology. So the fashion industry is one of the industries that's continuously exploring and embracing technology to help them evolve design and the design process. Fashion is functional. So in terms of categories, it ranges from intimate wear to sportswear to costume, all depending on the purpose to which it would serve. So it's definitely functional. Fashion is creative and technical. It involves exploring the relationship between 2D and 3D, which is what today's session in essence focuses on. Here at Norwich University of the Arts, we encourage our students to combine conceptual design practice with creative pattern cutting so that a symbiotic relationship is harnessed between the creative and the technical curiosity. We also aim to support our students to become independent learners and thinkers who are curious and passionate, and we encourage them to explore evolution of design through their own research that's inspired by areas that are of interest to them, and also through craft, be it traditional techniques, unique techniques, or technology. In preparation for today's workshop, I've asked the participants to use the 2D pattern that I've provided to create a basic bodice in paper. So those of you who are willing to share your bodice outcome with us, would you mind turning on your screens and showing me your creation so far? Lovely. It's looking lovely. So I can see there's a few people whose creations I can see. Looking lovely, well done. It's a great first step in the exploration of 2D and 3D. So I see a lot of you have them in your hands. Do you all have a bottle on hand that you can then place your bodice onto? Great, brilliant. There's an interesting variety of bottles as well. Lovely. Thank you so much for sharing that. So if we then take a step forward, so if we think about what you've actually done so far, by completing this simple exercise, you've essentially started to explore the relationship between 2D and 3D. And the reason I say that is because you've used darts to transform a flat piece of paper into a 3D outcome. So why is an understanding of the relationship between 2D and 3D so important in fashion then? Well, working in 2 dimensions offers many benefits, as does working in 3D. So what I thought we'd do before we actually start the workshop or the exercise for today is we could start by first considering the benefits of each, and then we can consider how they work in combination with each other. So a few of the benefits that we could consider of working in 3D or developing ideas in 3D include: 1, it allows for immediate response to research. So what I mean by that is that could be through students brainstorming or writing down keywords. That's one way for them to develop ideas in 2D. Another way, or another benefit of developing ideas in 2D is through quick sketches. The reason why that is really beneficial is it can be used as a tool to record initial design ideas. So really quickly, if you ask students or learners to do some quick sketches in response to their research, it's a great way to get ideas down on paper in a few minutes. A third benefit of working in 2D, if we then consider pattern cutting, so if we start with a flat pattern, it provides a foundation on which to build. So whether it be a flat bodice pattern, or a dress pattern, or a trouser pattern, if we're starting with a flat pattern, we at least have a foundation on which to build. So those are 3 of the benefits that I've identified that working in 3D assists with. If we then look at working in 3D, some of the benefits of working in 3D would be that, firstly, it enables visualization of the design intention in the 3D form. So what I mean by that is that you can immediately start to see the design sketches come to life on a mannequin, on the stand, and in our case, it will be on the bottle. So it enables visualization of design intention on the 3D form. The second benefit that I've identified of working in 3D is it assists to develop an understanding of drape, of structure, and of fabrication. So that would be in relation to working with fabrics. It's a little bit different when we're working with paper today, but the principle is still the same, that in terms of structure, we'd be able to see structure. Drape and fabrication, not so much on paper, but definitely on fabric. And the third point that I've identified as a benefit of working in 3D is that it encourages experimentation. So because students can see it developing, they're often encouraged to develop the ideas further. So how do these these benefits then fit into today's session? Well, today's workshop explores the benefits of connecting or combining these two ideas. So we're thinking about how we can connect and combine 2D and 3D idea generation. So why is this effective? Firstly, it allows for design ideas to develop through the cutting and visualization process. So that's the key words. It allows designs to develop through the cutting and visualization process without hindering creativity due to technical ability. So what you'll see today when we put this theory into practice is you'll be able to develop your ideas through cutting and through seeing without having to worry about how it technically would go together. So that's point one. Point two is it provides clarification of the construction in the sense that you can see the pattern as you develop it. So again, in relation to today's workshop, you saw the 2D bodice pattern and you created the 3D outcome. We're then going to use the shapes that you were provided with in the pack today. We're going to use those shapes, we're going to manipulate those shapes to create interesting forms. So in seeing the patterns in 2D and exploring outcomes in 3D, it provides, like I say, clarity in terms of construction. The third benefit of connecting or combining 2D and 3D idea generation is that it results in innovation and unexpected garment development that I would probably go as far as saying wouldn't be discovered on paper alone. And the final point that I've highlighted as a benefit of combining 2D and 3D idea generation is that it encourages learning by doing. Again, these benefits of 2D idea generation, 3D idea generation, or the combination of them is not limited to the points that I've identified. It's just a starting point or some food for thought. So let's explore this idea. Let's explore the benefits that I've just highlighted and mentioned to you. So we're going to explore the idea of combining 2D and 3D idea generation. The aim of the session is to challenge your own perception of the 3D form by using shapes as a tool to enhance the silhouette and develop or explore design details. So what I just wanted to mention before we start with the sort of playful element of the session is that if you want to at any point pin the screen that I am on, so you'll see currently you should be able to see two screens, one with my presentation and one with myself in it. I will be guiding you through the process of experimentation, and I'll be providing you with some ideas that you can explore. So you should be able to see me, my bodice on the bottle, as well as my hands. So I'll change the angle of my computer to enable you to see my hands. So if you want to change your screen, so to pin your screen so that the video or the tab that I'm in becomes bigger, you can do that. So if you click on, it might be located slightly differently on each of your screens, but what you'd be looking for is the tile that I'm in. And if you click on the three dots to the right, it should give you the option to pin the video onto a bigger screen. So for those of you who'd like to have me bigger on the screen instead of the presentation, then that's one way that you can achieve that. But just before I start, what I wanted to let you know is I have in the pack, I did provide you with some shapes, but by no means are you limited to those shapes. So please feel free to cut out extra shapes, bigger sizes. It's purely just a starting point. And also, as I talk through the ideas that we're going to be developing, I'd like to encourage you to experiment simultaneously. So I'll be doing some demonstrations. You're welcome to respond to the demonstration by creating the same item or use that as inspiration to create something else. What I'd also like, if I could, ask you to take part in the workshop with your screens, your videos or your screens on from this point forward. It would be really great because then it will allow for ideas to be exchanged between participants and also encourage your creativity. So if you are happy to share your screen with me, that would be great. And there will be a few points within this next session that I'll be engaging with you as well. So if you want to let us know on the chat, if you're happy to show your work and have a chat, that would be great as well. So if we start then with step one of our experimentation, the first step is to experiment with the shapes in their traditional form. So if you have a look at the shapes that you've been provided with, so you've got some circles, you have some rectangles, you have some triangles, start to consider where on your form you might want to place these shapes. So I'm going to begin with some circles, purely because circles are my personal favorite shape for no reason, no particular reason. It's just the shape that I do really enjoy. And I have my tape ready. So I'm going to be using sellotape as I go through this process, just because the sellotape will allow me to pick up the pieces and place them somewhere else if I decide that I want to change the idea or experiment with something slightly different. So just quickly going to get some of my sellotape ready. And then what I'm going to start with is, as I mentioned, the first step is to experiment with shapes in their traditional form. So I've selected some circles. If at any point you'd like me to slow down during the demonstration, please do let me know. Or if I'm going too quickly over something or you'd like me to repeat it, please do let me know. I'm happy to do so. Or if you can't see me or the screen at any point, give us a shout so we can fix that. So try not to overthink it. I would encourage you to just start placing some of the shapes on your bodice. Don't overthink it. You might want to place some of the same shapes together. You might want to start layering different shapes together. What you will notice though is on the bodice that I have provided you with, there's a center front line. The line that runs down from the neckline down to the waist is your center front line. Similarly, you've got a center back line at the back of the bodice. So something just to think about is if you start by placing your shapes on one side and then you place the same shape, so equally on the other side, you'll start to create a garment or an outcome that is symmetrical. Whereas if you're only working on one side of the body, you're starting to develop an idea that's asymmetrical. So either way, both of them are welcome. So if you just start to layer the shapes. Any amount of shapes, any variety of shapes. But for now, we're just using the shapes as they are. So no modifications, no changes, just a series of shapes. Like I've mentioned already, if you feel that you need many more shapes or bigger sizes or smaller sizes, please do feel free to cut more out. Absolutely more than welcome to do that. I would encourage you to do that. So the next step I'm going to take, what I've currently got on my bodice is I have a few circles all pinned onto one side of the garment. So it looks like I'm starting to develop an asymmetrical design. It might change as we go along. I don't know. I haven't decided that yet. It's good to keep an open mind. It allows for freedom of experimentation and expression. So for now, that's my first step. The next part of the development is a bit more creative in the sense that I would encourage you to get creative with the shapes that you've been given. So some ideas you might want to look at or consider is pleating or folding some of the shapes. So what I'll start with is probably one of the more obvious. So starting with a rectangle, I'm going to pleat the rectangle. We don't need to measure anything. We don't need to be precise. It's really just about exploring, experimenting, having some fun with the paper. So I've got a rectangle that I've pleated into something that looks almost like a triangle. I might actually pick up a few more pieces just so that I can pleat some more rectangles. to give me some variety to work with. Again, I just created another one. What I'm going to start to do with these is I'm going to start to pin them onto my form. And again, something you might want to consider, you can see this, something you might want to consider if you are working with a shape and pleat, or if you're working with, for example, a rectangle and you're pleating it into folds or into lines, you may want to now consider the placement of those lines on the bodice. So what I mean by that, line is something that in design you could use to create visual interest. So if I placed, for example, this sample of paper horizontally onto my bodice, what it would do is it would add stability, it would give me a sense of length, it would lead the eye up and down my 3D form. If I placed this rectangular piece of paper horizontally across the bodice, what it would do is it would emphasize the width of my bodice. If I then decided to place it diagonally across the bodice, what it would do is it would help me to create some movement. So I think that's the element I'm going to pick for now. So I'm going to place this diagonally across the body so that it helps me to create some movement. Turn it around to wrap with, and I'll turn it back so that you can see it in a second. So I'll take that one on. Since I've pleated another one, I think I might just fold it a little bit more, create some extra folds so that I can add to the ones that I've just pinned on. I think I'm going to add them on there. You can see me. There we are. I'm going to work it in an angle that you can still see. So what I've done now is I've added another one, then start looking at a different shape perhaps. So if I take a rectangle, a triangle, and I fold it in half to create a center line. I folded my triangle in half, then starting to pleat it like a concertina, as I would have done as a child, and I thoroughly enjoyed doing as a child. Hope you can see that. I'm pleating it, so what I'm doing is folding it one way and then folding it over in the complete opposite direction. Then I'm folding it back on itself, so it creates this sort of effect. I'm going to continue to do that on the other side as well. So folding it from top to bottom, then from bottom to top, top to bottom again, until I run out of paper. So what I've now created is this lovely shape. Which I can either use open and place that on my bodice somewhere, or I can sellotape the bottom together so that it gives me a leaf inspired shape. So I think I might do that. I quite like looking at nature for design inspiration, so I think I'll carry that through. I'm just taping it together so that it holds. You can do the same or use the same folding technique. You can apply that to some other shapes as well. So one that you might want to do, or you might be really familiar with, is the folding of the fan. So with this, I've used just a rectangle and I've folded it into a fan, and I've used some sellotape to hold the 2 points together. So that would be something quite interesting to add on to the body, help us to challenge our perception of the 3D form. So because it's quite a big shape, I think for now I'm just going to hold on to it. I might come back to it and use it. I haven't decided yet. Another shape that you could try and pleat is a circle or a semicircle. So again, with something like this, if we're applying the same technique, same folding technique, and we're folding top to bottom, bottom to top again, so we're creating a sort of concertina. You might end up with something that looks like this, for starters. You can then fold that in half. And that gives us a much more soft look in terms of shape. So still a similar leaf shape, but something that's a bit softer around the edges. So I quite like that. I think I'm going to add that on as well. Something to consider with these shapes. So while you're using folding and pleating as a sort of feature within your shapes development, what you might want to consider is the rhythm in terms of the placement. So what I mean by that is, if you start to look at where you're placing your shapes, your pleated or your folded shapes onto your bodice, you may want to think about how you could use the shapes to help enhance the flow over the bodice. So what I mean by that, if you have a look at where I've used the lines or the pleating, so I've used the lines or the pleating in a diagonal, or placed it diagonally. So what it does is it's creating movement. And what I'm now doing is I'm adding these shapes to, for example, the top shoulder, so that it's enhancing sort of the rhythm of the garment. So what it's doing is it's helping to lead the eye over the garment as well. Repeating shapes in a different area, for example, if you repeated a series of shapes in an area, it could also help you to create some rhythm. That on there. I've got 2 different shapes over there. Something else you could consider is some folding. So up until this point, I've been exploring pleating, but you could also consider folding some of the shapes. So I'll take a circle and I fold it again. I'm not measuring anything. I'm just letting the shape develop as I fold it. You can create something that almost looks like a ruffle or a frill. That might be interesting. I can use that to add some volume again to the shoulder. There. One still carrying on. Lovely. So I'll go on to one more and then we'll have a look at what you've been working on. So the next point of inspiration would be to look at the shapes and consider which of the shapes you'd want to exaggerate the proportions of. Perhaps you want to exaggerate the proportions of all the shapes. Or you might want to amend it into something different. So I'm going to pick a triangle because it's the only shape I haven't yet explored. So again, I'm going to fold it. I'm going to try and change it into something slightly different. So I'm going to start cutting into it. Create some interest. So when I now open it up, the negative space is creating some interest. Let's start to add that on as well. On to my bodice. Back to the circle. Something else you might want to do. So I've actually already, because I know how much I love circles, I've cut out a much bigger circle that I can experiment with. So again, I'm going to look at how I can potentially change it into something different. So I'm going to start by cutting a spiral. You can see, yes. So I'm not measuring it, not overthinking it, I'm just cutting it by eye. You can measure it if you'd like, but because we are experimenting, having fun, I would say just go with it. You might need, if you are trying this technique, you might need to hold it together so you don't accidentally cut off some of the spiral, or you can let it hang. So what's important with this one is to just leave a little bit at the end, so don't cut right through it. So you'll see I've left a little bit at the end, and you can already see how what's happened is I'm now creating something that has quite a lot of movement. And something you might want to think about is if you did start with some pleats or use pleating as a first step on your bodice, what you can do is you can consider tucking in some of your design features into those pleats. So for example, if I start, just change the angle so you can see me. If I start here and I tuck in my spiral into one of the pleats, it actually helps to hold it quite beautifully. And then I can twist it around. We'll let that hang for now. Change that a little bit. So you might want to twist it around some of your other developments, or tape it down. So I actually think I might tape some of it down so that it holds. Another shape manipulation that works well is, again, with a circle. So if I'll hold this up so you can see it. If you take the circle and you fold it in half, some of you might start to recognize the shape, the flat pattern shape from this, and you fold it into a quarter. So now you have a quarter of a circle, and you cut out a circle from the center. You will end up with a flat paper pattern for a full skirt. So some of you might be already familiar with that. So you've almost got a full skirt pattern. For the purpose of this exercise, I'm again just going to cut into it somewhere so that I've got an opening. And again, that then gives me a lovely shape that I can use to explore form and enhance the form of my bodice. So again, I'm going to pin it back onto my bodice. Tucking it under some of the folds. So I'm starting to create a layered effect. Some more sellotape. Really think about some of the shapes that you're experimenting with. Layer some of them on top of each other, or tuck them into something else. What you might want to start to consider at this point as well is the emphasis of your form. So what I mean by that is a focal point somewhere on your 3D form that you can then use as the emphasis for the bodice. So what it will do is it will then attract the eye to a specific area. So unintentionally, by me placing all of my experimentation on this one area, on the top shoulder, I've already started to create a focal point or an emphasis on that area because it is so concentrated with shape. So you might want to just hold or place your bottle slightly away from you and just have a look at what you are creating so far. Can you see a focal point within your 3D form? Is there an area that's been emphasized by a lot of shapes that you've placed? Or perhaps in exaggerating the proportions of one of your shapes, it's created a focal point on your bodice because it is large. I'm going to just pin the skirts bit on. Maybe we can start to have a look at where you are and have a look at the designs you've created so far. You can still see that. So I'm continuing to place different shapes on top of each other, next to each other, folding some into each other and over each other, really pushing the meaning of experimentation and really considering how I can challenge the 3D form. I'm even folding through some of the shapes in my spiral, see what I end up with. So those of you who are willing to share your screen with me, do you want to show me what you've been working on so we can have a look?
So if anybody would like to share, you can just let us know in the chat, or you can attempt to wave at me. Oh, okay, so Jane is ready. There we go.
Jane, I can see you. Would you like to show me what you're working on? You can bring it, let me see if I can pin you bigger. There we go. That's looking lovely. And you've already...
organic look to it.
Lovely. Some structure, some
Did you
fold? It looks like you've almost folded as rectangles into sort of cones.
Yeah, they were. That's these squares, and then that was circles, which I doubled up on itself, and then I used the triangles to make like kind of a leaf.
Okay. And you're starting to place some of those shapes around the body as well.
Yeah, I've gone around the back, and then obviously down the sides.
Lovely.
Experimenting, really.
Good, and that's exactly what the workshop is about, is experimenting, just seeing where the experimentation takes you, and I'd say continue building on it. Let's see what you come up with in the next steps. Well done.
All right, thank you.
Anyone else who'd like to show me what they're working on?
Yeah. Is that Bonnie there?
Yes.
Bonnie, I can see you've got a lovely smile, really excited to show us what you're working on. Let me see if I can make the screen a bit bigger so I can see you. Oh, that's looking lovely. Lots of circles, which is always good to see.
Thank you.
If you haven't noticed, I'm a little bit biased towards circles. I'm not sure why, but I really do love them.
I just wanted to get it flowing through, sort of a bit of Gaudi-esque, really, trying to copy a Gaudi's feel to it.
It's looking lovely, and I think it's definitely sort of that angled shape that you've got at the top there is creating the focal points, and then you leading the eye across the bodies quite beautifully with all the folds.
Yeah.
Looking lovely. Have you started working on the back yet?
Not yet, no. Jane's ahead of me. We work together, so.
Oh, really? Right. That's looking lovely. Thank you for sharing, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to show us what they're working on? Yvette, you're waving yours around there.
So I've just asked you to unmute, so hopefully you should come on momentarily.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi, how are you, Yvette?
I'm fine, thank you.
Yeah,
I feel like mine's got a bit of a Celtic feel to it.
it's looking lovely. You've got some circles, you've got some pleating on there. And I can see you starting to consider sort of sleeves on your bodice. Yep. There's some sleeves. Have you started working on the back yet, or are you focusing on the front?
No, not yet. I'm going to start that.
I'm also only focusing on the front for now, so absolutely fine. It's looking lovely. Have you found a specific shape that you're enjoying?
Thank you. I think I'm a bit like you. I'm circles and spirals biased.
Oh, really? Okay. Great. Thank you for sharing. It's looking lovely.
Okay.
So should we have a look at one more, and then we'll take the next few steps, and then we can come back again. Is there anybody who'd like to show us at this stage? Claire, were you waving at me? Thank you.
I've asked you to unmute.
Hello.
Hello. You're right.
I'm quite angular, and I was looking at those. Can you remember those chatterboxes? I think they were called. We used to make when you were kids,
Yes.
and you used to pick a number, pick a colour, that sort of thing. So I made some of those and sort of stuck them on. Can you see that?
Oh, lovely. I think a number of chatterboxes in a variety of different sizes would look
Yeah.
amazing and create.
They look good together if you sort of group them together.
Absolutely. Oh, that's a lovely idea. We've got a fan there. Do you mind just holding it up again for me? We've got a spiral. It's looking lovely. Have you found a specific shape that you're more drawn to or attracted to? Any
I quite like this now. I've just done this, so I'll sort of an inside-out chatterbox. So I might join some of those together, smaller around the back.
Great. Brilliant. It's looking lovely. Thank you for sharing. Okay. It's looking great. Thank you, everyone. So if we then continue to explore form and we look at the next step, it's actually already on the screen for those of you who still have the presentation up. So think about how you could layer some of the same shapes or a combination of shapes together. So with the chatterbox, you might want to layer some of the chatterboxes or some of the angular. I think Jane, you showed us some of your angular, some of the rolled fabric. You might want to layer some of that. And what that might help you to do is it might help you to achieve sort of an element of texture, or it might help you to add an element of texture to your form. So remember, anything with texture would generally add interest to a form. It can also help to enhance the overall feel or appearance of the outcome. So you might want to add some texture. So I'll give you an example. We'll come back to start with a rectangle. And what I'm going to do is just fold the rectangle. Fold it in half. I'm going to fold it in half again. Fold it in half again. I think I want something a little bit more dainty, so I'm going to fold it again. Hopefully I can still cut through all of these layers, and I'm going to cut into it, see what I can create. So if you do decide to explore a technique similar to this one, just bear in mind, I'll show you when I open it out. I've got some bunting, which everybody loves a little bit of bunting. Just remember, if you are trying a shape or cutting out a shape using this technique, just remember to leave the little bit at the ends, because if you cut right through to your folds, it means you're going to end up with a lot of little triangles, which is also not a bad idea. We can then stick them together somewhere. But if you're wanting to cut into your folded paper, but still have the pieces together, remember, like I say, just leave that little bit at the top. So I've now got some bunting, and actually if I look at the piece that I've just cut off, I've got some more bunting on a different scale. So that's quite nice. And what I might want to then think about doing is, when I'm thinking about texture, is I might want to use one of the techniques I've already explored, but perhaps I can consider folding these. So if I fold the bunting, I'll show you what it looks like from my side in a minute. Look what starts to happen. So if you look on this side, start to create a lot more texture. So I could either place the bunting as it is somewhere on my 3D form, and it gives me more of a jagged sort of feel. But I think with what I'm developing so far, it seems a little bit softer. So I'm probably going to go with the pleated version of the bunting, just because I think that even though the triangles are still a bit more harsh, pleating it just gives me a little bit of a softer hand feel, and it's more in line with the rest of the development. So I'm going to go with the pleating. I'm going to stick them together so that they hold, and then I can place them onto the form again. At this point, you might want to also start to consider balance within your 3D form. So think about how the features or the details that you've got on your bodice so far, where is the distribution of the weight within your design? So if you look at your design, does it look like it's top heavy? So I would then suggest to start to place some more features perhaps towards the bottom, so you're creating some balance within the garment. Or if it's bottom heavy, you might want to consider adding something to the top so that it's balanced. It doesn't need to be balanced in terms of the left and the right need to have exactly the same design features, just balanced in terms of the amount of items that you've placed in a specific area. So I'm going to add that there. And I definitely think mine needs a bit more balance because it seems to be flowing off to one side. So I'm going to try and balance that with some more pleats. Let me see if I can fold some pleats quickly. I'll come back to the bunting in a minute. I actually think I'm also going to start cutting. I'm going to cut away from some of my pleating that I have currently on the body, just to create a straighter line so that it will help me to balance my garments or my form. But don't be afraid to cut into your experimentation as well. Might need a little bit more tape to hold down the areas that you've just cut off. Might also help to tape some of it to the bottle if that's needed. Long, so I'm going to trim that off a little bit as well. There we go. I'm adding a pleated rectangular shape to the bottom of my bodice over here to try and add some balance, because currently I have my focal point at the top and the diagonal lines are drawing my eye across the bodice. So I'm going to add the pleating down to the bottom here just to create some sort of balance, because I feel that it ends quite abruptly over there. That on. For those of you who haven't yet started working on the back, it would be a good point in the workshop now to start working on the back of your form. So you might want to repeat some of the same shapes on the back. You might want to use some of the techniques you've already explored to develop more shapes to go at the back. What's important to consider there is the unity, sort of the unity of the garment. So how does the garment come together overall? So think about the garment as a 360. So you might want to slowly start to swivel your bottle around and think about, are there elements of the front that are already wrapping across to the back? So if you look at my example, the folded pleats that I had taped onto the front of my bodice has started wrapping itself around towards the back, which I quite like because it's helping to create sort of a union or unity between the front and the back. So I think that's something I'm definitely going to keep, and I might actually aim to do something similar on the other side seam so that I can wrap the front and the back together. And then I'll start to work on the back as well. So have a look at what you've created so far. And if you have elements on the front and elements on the back, but there's nothing on the side seams, start to consider how you can bring those two together. Because what you wouldn't want to necessarily do is you wouldn't want it to seem that the front's being considered in design and the back's being considered in design. But as soon as you then rotate the bottle to the side seam, there's nothing there. It's really important to consider the side seams as well, so that they flow into one another. So I'm using some more circles. See if I can add some more texture to mine. I'm going to also try and see if I can use my spiral to wrap around the body in some way to try and create the unity. Carry that through, we'll carry that across, tucking it under my pleats at certain places that it holds together. I quite enjoyed the outcome of the shapes that I created at the top here, so I'm going to repeat some of those shapes. As I mentioned earlier, at the start of the experimentation part of the workshop, don't feel that because you've stuck a piece down onto the bodice that it needs to stay there forever. You're welcome to sort of cut it off, move it around, if it'll help you to create a more considered outcome. So that's something that I'm now working with. I'm moving my circle that I'd cut the inner circle out of, or remove the inner circle from the bigger circle. I'm now experimenting with that piece a little bit more to try and emphasize my focal points. You can also layer some shapes together. So I know we started with that right in the beginning, but you might find now that some of the basic simple circle shapes or triangle shapes or rectangle shapes might actually just be exactly what you need to add that little touch of something. So remember, you can always go back to the basic shapes. If you'd like, you can also remove some of the bodice. So what I mean by that is, again, don't be afraid to cut away. So I'm going to see if I can, I'm right-handed, so I just need to put it in a position that I can cut it. But what I'm going to do is cut away from the bodice. So changing up the silhouette a little bit more. There we go. Cutting away from the bodice, so you can see I've now actually taken away the shoulder of the bodice completely, and I'm going to cut into the back as well. Because again, I'm considering the 360 perspective. Cut away from the back a little bit before I start to develop the back, the design of the back. There we go. Created a little one shoulder. So could I have a look at some of your outcomes? Is there anybody who'd like to share at this point? Perhaps if there's somebody we haven't yet seen, if you'd like to share your work with us. I can hear a voice.
It's Toby.
Toby, hello. I'm just going to quickly find you on the screen. There you are, brilliant. Hi, Toby.
Oh. Hello. So I kind of went with the kind of circle at first, and then went in with the pleat, and then kind of extended that round to then develop into like a cone, kind of like a rough shoulder kind of feature, but still keeping it quite slim on the inside.
Yeah.
And then on the back, that kind of repeating the fold has kind of come as if it's like it's coming underneath to kind of come around the back, and then I'm going to kind of do the back the same here, like so.
It's looking lovely, and I can see you're really starting to consider the elements on the front and how they can continue over to the back. It's looking lovely. It really reminds me of sort of Victor and Rolf. So
yeah. Kind of the same, like that dress, didn't they, where they did layers and layers and layers on top, didn't they?
Yep, all the tulle, and then they cut into it. It's looking lovely.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Continue to work on it. I'd like to see how it develops.
Thank you.
Thanks, Toby. Anyone else? Anna, you waving a hand?
Hi.
Hi, Anna.
I start off with triangles, but to make them softer, I don't know if you can see. To make them softer, I kind of folded them,
yeah,
and brought them around the front, down the side, and then I added circles, but kind of folded them so they were kind of like triangles. And over the shoulder, kind of wanted to make it flatter, so I just had some flat triangles kind of petering out. And I kind of think that's what I'm starting to work on this side, where it becomes the scale becomes smaller, and then they kind of come down the back to become flatter. and
So
smaller.
changing the scale is also helping to create a flow around the body. It's looking lovely. So could I go as far as saying triangles are probably your shape of choice, Anna?
Well, I just like all geometric shapes, I think. I just thought I'd give them a go today.
Well done, it's looking great.
Thank you.
Really looking great. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who wants to show us what they're working on? Can't see anybody else waving.
I'm happy to.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
I don't mind sharing.
Is that Lynn? I can see you right at the
There
end
we
of
go.
Hello.
Thanks, Lynn. Hello.
Hello. I kind of started off with a big triangle, but trying to keep the shape, but just kind of twisting it slightly, and then kind of like this idea of having like layers of pleats, and then a couple of circles kind of coming out. So that's kind of like the start of it, and it's sort of flowing down, and then kind of taking the pleats around the back. And I'm just kind of playing around with like a sleeve shape on this side.
It's looking great. I love what you've done with the pleating, and I really love the fact that you've continued it around the body, because it's keeping sort of one design idea and transforming it across 360. That's looking great.
Thank you.
It'll be interesting to see if you repeat some of those elements that you've got on the front there, if you use some of those, perhaps in a slightly different way, but on the back, so that there's similarity, but there's still a bit of difference. It's looking lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. That's looking lovely. So we, if I can then wrap up with, that was my last point in terms of experimentation. And as you can see, the more you experiment and explore, the more you're able to challenge your own perception of the 3D form. And what you'll also notice is if you had to present your ideas to a different audience, or different audiences, should I say, their views or their perceptions on that form would also be quite different. So it's really lovely to see how, even though you were all given the same starting point and the same starting block, if I can call it that, so the same block, the same shapes, you've really pushed your own perception of the 3D form to create some really lovely outcomes. So that's been great. So thank you for that. So the last bit, just before we wrap up with our session today, is I just wanted to say firstly, thank you for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed the session today. I've really enjoyed engaging with some of you and seeing your paper outcomes. And we'd love for you to share some of those outcomes with us. So Liv, do you mind just giving our participants a little bit more information about how they can do that?
Yeah, so as we've done with the other workshops, we would love to see them particularly on Instagram. So if you do post them on Instagram, you can tag us NUA Outreach using that or the NUA Outreach hashtag, and then we'll be reposting them. And as I've mentioned before, we're hoping to do a little showcase on the 2nd of July. So we'll be choosing a few examples from each workshop and putting them on there. You can also email us, which would be our student.recruitment@nua.ac.uk. I'll pop both of those in the chat for you now, so you've got those kind of in writing. But as Laura said, we'd love to see them. And much like the Sculpture Matters workshop, if any of you attended that one, we'd love to kind of see them in the most outrageous locations you could possibly find.
Absolutely.
So please push yourselves for the kind of winning spot on the showcase on the 2nd of July.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Liv. And just to add one final little bit here is, apart from following our social media, please also keep an eye out on our website, and I've included links there to our fashion Instagram as well as the university's Instagram, because over the next few weeks you'll be able to see what this year's graduates have been working on. So they've created some really exciting outcomes, and you'll, like I say, be able to see some of those outcomes on our Instagram and on our website. So I've included those details in the presentation. And thank you for joining me once again.
So thanks, Laura. And just a note from me that we do have space on the rest of the workshop series still. So if you haven't booked on, there's still very much time to do that. And also just a note that if any of you have booked onto the workshop I think it's on Thursday, the storytelling workshop. If you are able to create a story that you can submit to us in advance, we'd love to see those. So you can email those over to student.recruitment@nua.ac.uk. But otherwise, I think that's everything from us. But if you do have any questions that you'd like to ask Laura before we end for the day, do pop those in the chat and we can stay on for a little bit longer just to get those answered. So we'll hang around for a few minutes and just make sure if you do have any of those. Otherwise, lots of thank yous. So thank you very much for all of your thank yous.
Thank you, and thank you for joining me. Absolutely great. Jane, you look very excited about your outcome. I'm pleased. Lovely. Some really lovely items I can see on the screen. Lovely. Teresa is looking lovely. I can see you waving that at me. It's lovely. Rachel, looking at the 360 angle, 360 degree angles. Great.
I can't wait to see the photos that come in.
Me too. I really do hope you all are willing to share your lovely outcomes with us. It would be great to post them.
I think it's going to be particularly tricky for this one to pick a few to showcase.
Could we have them all, Liv?
Pardon?
Could we have them all?
What, just have your section on the showcases? Everyone's, I mean, I can see what I can do.
It's looking lovely. Lucy, it's looking great. There's some spikes there. Looking lovely. Oh, look at that, all the angles. It's looking great. Rachel, I can see yours looking good. Lots of spirals. It's lovely. Linda, you're holding yours up. It's lovely. And Donna, I can see yours. It's great. It's lovely.
I love how different they all are. It's amazing.
And we all started with the same shapes. Fantastic.
So I don't think we've had any questions through. So I think we'll leave it there, give you all some time to hopefully get out in the sunshine for the rest of today. But thank you very much for joining us, and hopefully I'll see you all a bit later in the week as well. So
Brilliant.
thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.